Hello, I'd like to talk about episodic horror, and certainly I have a great interest in episodic games. I've talked about it here. It definitely solves some production problems and creates some new and strange ones, but I think in general, in looking at horror as a genre, it's kind of tough to say something that did episodic horror really well, and I'm sure the comment fields will be flooded with all the examples that I'm not thinking of. But let me just, talk about things, episodic horror, and see if we can come to any conclusions or what works or what doesn't. So, like, for example, Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone had some horror-themed episodes. Really great, love the Twilight Zone, but that was sort of more of an anthology, and I think that's not exactly episodic horror, and so there's also Tales from the Crypt, which I never really watched because the Crypt Keeper scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, whenever that was on. I was probably like 17. I was still terrified now. Yeah, so I never really got into Tales from the Crypt, but it's my understanding that the Crypt Keeper would tell a tale, and then it would be, scary, and then he'd wrap it up. I think they did a Friday the 13th show that was similar in that format. So, I don't know, those are sort of the oldish horror things that are standing out. But, I mean, sort of looking at the current episodic horror landscape, there's a number of shows. Certainly Walking Dead is awesome. I would argue it's not exactly horrific. I mean, I guess there's some horrific things that happened, but it's not intended to scare. It's more of a drama, at least in my mind. So I don't think we can learn too much about episodic horror from that. I mean, certainly episodic drama is something which works really well. There's The Strain. I'm really enjoying The Strain. But I don't know. I just so far it hasn't been overly horrific. It's more almost like a CSI procedural thing. There's Hannibal, which I think does some things really well. The audio design is amazing. Some of the imagery is just super disturbing. But again, it's not really scary. It's almost like, again, there's a little of the procedural element to it, and I mean, certainly I've made the argument that Silence of the Lambs may not be horror. It may actually be suspense, and, well, that's enough for another developer diary on its own. So I'll skip over Hannibal. There was the Dracula thing, which I didn't really like. It wasn't very horrific, in my mind. And there's Under the Dome, which is interesting, and I like the show, but I read the book, and the book was really clever. And I just feel like it might end up doing the Lost thing, where it just, like meanders and meanders and meanders, and then you don't even know what it's about anymore. Because, I mean, like, if you watch season 1, I mean, season 1 was kind of tight-ish, there were some conflicts. And then season 2, they, like, reboot everything. They kill off some characters and introduce some new crazy characters. And start, characters changing, and I don't know, and I mean, I don't know. Certainly I'm still enjoying the show, but it does seem weird that so much has changed between season 1 and the first episode of season 2, and maybe season 2 will go in a cool direction. I don't know. But, I mean, even if you look at Under the Dome, I don't think it's a super scary novel. It's really good. I mean, it's a bit of a slow burn, but the ending is just awesome. So, I mean, I would really recommend the novel. But, I mean, the TV show is sort of its own different animal. And again, I think it almost falls more into the Walking Dead trap of this is, this is more about the drama. And certainly X-Files has some really creepy and scary things, but again, that was more of an anthology. The characters were the same, but the cases were different. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that for horror, it's very difficult to maintain the tension over a series of episodes. And over a series, because every time you put the episode down, stop watching it, do something else, and then come back a week later, all that sort of carefully built up tension is lost. So, like, you know, I'm trying to think of a good, you know, I mean, I guess like American Horror Story. Again, some of that was pretty episodic, and the tension didn't quite carry over, and I sort of have a love-hate thing with American Horror Story. I think some things they do well, and some things they don't, and again, they're almost even going for more of an anthology thing. I mean, in that each season is 10 weeks, or 10 episodes, and, you know, covers sort of one topic, and then they just throw it out and start something new, and, you know, have new ghosts and ghouls and things like that. So I mean, I guess, and someone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any good sort of episodic horror in that it maintains the tension across multiple episodes. And I think this is something to think about, you know, when people think about, you know, episodic horror games. You know, and certainly we almost delivered Neverending Nightmares episodically to beta and alpha packers. I mean, in that we kept, you know, updating with a new level as we finished it, and of course went back and polished the old levels too. But the difficulty with that is that, well, I mean, basically, since our game is not overly long, people would just start over, and they would get the full tension. But I'm just trying to think of, you know, if we had genuinely set out, you know, we're gonna, like, do the Telltale model or something, and create episodic horror, how could we build the tension over an entire season? And I think that the answer is you can't really, and I don't know, maybe someone more clever than I will respond to the forums, but I mean, it seems to me that, you know, giving people a break, a release from that tension, especially for an extended period of time. I mean, obviously people will put Neverending Nightmares down and come back the next day, although, I mean, again, it's, you know, you can get through one dramatic path in one sitting. You can get through all of our content in one sitting. I mean, I expect, you know, to fully get everything, you know, it'll be maybe 3 hours, maybe 4. Which, I mean, I don't know, I've done marathon gaming sessions longer than that, and to some extent I think that's almost ideal, is playing the game in one sitting, and that's something that, you know, I sort of set out to do. I felt like, you know, a horror movie is usually 90 minutes, and I mean, if you race through things, you can probably get through, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe even at a decent pace, you can get to an ending in Neverending Nightmares in 90 minutes, and then, you know, we have the branches and sort of stuff to keep you coming back and you know, add more to the experience. But, I mean, I like the idea that, you know, I sit down and play, and, you know, that tension is carried over, because, like, for example, I've been playing Fatal Frame 3. Well, I haven't actively been playing it, but I started playing Fatal Frame 3 a long time ago, and then I sort of put it down, and I was, like, really into it for a bit, and then I put it down, and now it's been, I don't know, several weeks since I last played it, maybe a month, and, you know, like, Fatal Frame 3, I love Fatal Frame 1 and 2. 4 was never released in America, and the new trailer for the latest one looks amazing, but of course it's releasing in September in Japan and maybe never in America. Boo! They better bring it over. But anyway, Fatal Frame 3, I think, is flawed. I mean, in that it is just so long, and especially because it repeats a lot of content. I mean, like, you know, Fatal Frame 1 was a smaller game, but I felt like, yeah, I wasn't playing through exactly the same thing over and over and over again. I think they really were more clever about how they structured the level and the progressions and the different nights, because now I feel like in Fatal Frame 3, it's like, oh, this night is the same as the other night. And I think, you know, that's, I've sort of lost all of the tension, you know, every time I pick up the game and I have to figure out what am I doing and why am I doing it, and, you know, then I'm like, I already did this, but I was playing as a different character, or, you know, like, I mean, certainly, and that was sort of one of my ideas for the branching narratives in Neverending Nightmares is, essentially very similar content and remixed, and things are a little different. And I thought, like, oh, that'll be a good way to get more playtime. And I mean, certainly, some have argued that, we reuse content too much. Already, which, I mean, is neither here nor there. We have a limited development budget, and to some extent it's deliberate. And it's something I was talking to Davey from Stanley Parable Galactic Cafe, and he was saying, that people really liked it in the Stanley Parable when you think you know what's going to happen, you think oh, this is a room I've been in before, but then different things happen. And so that's what, at least in my mind, is sort of the expectation we've been playing with, and sort of why there are some sort of rearranged levels or portions of levels appear here and there, is we're basically saying, this is what you're expecting, but it's not playing out that way. And so, I mean, that's, I guess, straying far from my original thesis of episodic horror, but I guess the summary is that, what I'm really trying to get at is that, splitting horror over a long period of time and multiple viewings or multiple gaming sessions is difficult. And I think, if your episodic horror game, depends on that, or your episodic, horror TV show is trying to do this slow burn and build up, it's going to be a lot harder to pull off. And I mean, certainly, like, Under the Dome was pretty long. It took me a while to read. So I don't know. I wonder why it kind of works better in books than in TV shows or video games. I don't know. I mean, I guess because your imagination still persists, and the world only exists in your imagination. And now I'm totally destroying my thesis of the video by throwing in the topics of books. But, I mean, I guess at least for TV shows and episodic video games, I think it's a challenge. And especially if you're not planning on churning out the episodes, or, if you're not planning to make them sort of contain, like, the Penumbra series, I mean, episode 1 is basically like a different game than episode 2. I mean, it's almost a sequel. I'm not entirely certain why they called it episodic, per se, but, I mean, I guess 1 sort of completes the story of 2, or, 2 completes the story of 1. But anyway, that's sort of my ramblings on episodic horror, and certainly if someone has a good example of a TV show that was trying to build tension over a long period of time. Although one caveat is that I think, something like Netflix series where you get all the episodes at once, that could be interesting for creating an episodic horror. Oh, one other thing is Alan Wake. They did a really cool sort of episodic thing, but it was sold on 1 disc, so you could keep playing through the episodes, which is kind of like the Netflix model. So, I mean, I guess episodic-ish sort of episodic horror works if you give all the episodes at the same time. Anyway, I really better shut up. So, thanks for watching.